Welcome to the coffee shop with a Yeshua mug. What a great day it is, and we're going to do a fantastic study on a subject I had never had any idea I was going to cover, but I think you'll find it very enlightening. You know, the astronomers Tucker, Tholen, and Bernardi were using the University of Arizona's Bach 2.3-meter telescope at the Kitt Peak National Observatory. And they had created a strategy to locate hazardous asteroids. And they decided that they're going to look straight into the sun. That was their strategy because most of the time people don't look into the sun because it's very hard to see. And so they were there, had a couple of days to do this. And lo and behold, they found an asteroid when they looked in the sun. And they discovered asteroid 2004 MN4. And it turned out to be a 4 out of 10 on the hazard scale. And that is the highest level of any asteroid that has been ever found. So that's pretty significant. You'd think a 4 out of 10, that's still kind of low, but that's the highest of any. And so for a while it looked as though it was going to hit the Earth in 2029. But then they looked at some other images and they said, no, we don't think it's going to hit. And so they always want to push that narrative now. And so the first faint image that they found, they went back and looked because they said it looked like it's going to hit the Earth. And it was from March 15th of 2004. And this is where this whole part of this video came about. Is the Holy Spirit led me after I had found March 15th. I woke up one day and he's like, go look and see what happened on March 15th. And amazingly, another significant event happened. And that's really why we're making this video, because it's a pattern. And we'll get to that. Okay, so let's go back to a year earlier, for 2003. President George Bush was heavily pressuring Israel to make peace with the Palestinians, who had proven themselves to be a group that really didn't want peace. But nevertheless, they went along with it, and Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, in his government, they officially agreed to Bush's roadmap for peace, okay, and in a provisional demilitarized Palestinian state. And they agreed on that on May 24th of 2003. And even though the expectations were unreasonable, the Palestinians had to reform, which they're not going to do. They had to cease violence. They had to dismantle Hamas and accept Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, as well as waive any right of return for Palestinian refugees. And you know none of that's ever going to happen, but that was the conditions that Israel said, okay, we'll go along with it if they do this. 1 week after this, President Bush, he toured the Middle East, and he, in his roadmap, at the Red Sea Summit, and on the Jordanian Red Sea resort of Aqaba, on June the 4th of 2003, attending were Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, and filling the newly created position of Palestinian Prime Minister was Mahmoud Abbas. They created this position just to have somebody they can negotiate with, okay? They didn't, they said, well, maybe we'll find somebody. And so Yasser Arafat couldn't be trusted. And so now we have a 2-month-old new Prime Minister, a Palestinian Prime Minister, and maybe some progress could be made. President Bush, he formed an international group to stand with him and to actually put greater pressure on to be applied to the peace process and Israel, and he called it the Quartet. And it was the United States, the European Union, the United Nations, and Russia. And this quartet was actually a representation of every nation on the planet and every military power, if you look at it. And so it was just like a glorified United Nations with more muscle power, especially when you bring Russia in, you know. And so on the March 15th, now we're going back a year further after he did his Red Sea Summit, the same day that asteroid 2004 MN4 appeared, the Israeli Knesset had a special session for the sole purpose of gaining approval for a disengagement plan. And Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon was asking the lawmakers to approve a unilateral withdrawal of Israeli citizens from the Gaza Strip, as well as from 4 other settlements in Samaria, which is Israel's their heartland. And he said 10 months have elapsed since the government of Israel accepted President Bush's roadmap peace plan, albeit with 14 reservations. The terrorism, the violence, and the incitement have not ceased during this period, and the Palestinian side is not taking any steps to stop these actions. So Ariel Sharon saw no way out of the headlock that George W. Bush had placed on Israel. Even with the new Palestinian Prime Minister, nothing had changed. The Palestinians were not the least bit interested in making peace, but nevertheless the pressure was on from the United States and the Quartet and the UN and Russia and the European Union to make peace. So there was only one thing he could do, and is give up and withdraw. And so he gave the Palestinians the land, and he said maybe this will appease the United States and turn the pressure off onto the Palestinians. And so on March the 15th, 2004, this is the infamous day, Sharon convinced the Knesset to vote in favor of withdrawing, and they agreed, but by only one vote. 46 votes for to 45 against. Excuse me, I'll have a cup of coffee. So the Israeli government had finally relinquished to the massive global pressure brought on, mainly from the United States, and they would now force their own citizens to leave their biblically allotted land, not only in Gaza, but also in 4 settlements in northern Samaria. That's their historical biblical heartland. So forebodingly, it was on this same day that the first faint glimpse of Asteroid 2004 MN4 appeared. And this is very significant. So the day they decided, okay, we'll give up our land, this little bitty faint asteroid appears. As you'll see, this follows a pattern where catastrophic events happen to the United States every time a U.S. president tries to get Israel to give up its land, and the disastrous event, it always happens the same day. It's amazing. It happens on the very same day, and that's how you know this is from God. Look at President Bush's arrogance at the Red Sea Summit. He's pointing to both parties at the same time with both hands in such a condescending manner. It blatantly shows that he was the one in charge. And 1 year later, on the same day that Bush had finally pushed Israel over the brink, God responded from the heavens, and the ominous asteroid 2004 MN4 appeared. After the March 15th Knesset agreement to disengage, the Israeli cabinet voted to approve Sharon's specific disengagement plan on June the 6th. The same day the White House issued this press release approving the Prime Minister's disengagement plan to withdraw from all the settlements in Gaza and certain settlements of the West Bank, and it urged Israel to proceed as rapidly as possible. A week later, George Bush wrote this letter outlining the specifics on exactly what he was asking Israel to do. He said, "I remain committed to my June 24th, 2002 vision of 2 states living side by side in peace and security as the key to peace." That's what they always say. So President Bush is determined to split Israel up and form a new Palestinian state, which historically has never ever existed. And then he said, "We welcome the disengagement plan you have prepared, under which Israel would withdraw certain military installations in all settlements from Gaza and withdraw certain military installations and settlements in the West Bank." George W. Bush avidly welcomed Israel's withdrawal from their historical land, and he said, go as rapidly as possible. As part of the final peace settlement, Israel must have secure and recognized borders, which should emerge from negotiations between the parties in accordance with the United Nations Security Council resolutions 242 and 338. So President Bush he's following the United Nations rulings on Israel. That's what he's saying. That's what we're going to go by. The United Nations Security Council resolution 242 was passed on November 22nd of 1967, 5 months after Israel had regained the territories from Egypt, Jordan, and Syria in the Six-Day War. And this is what the Resolution 242 says. The Security Council, expressing its continuing concern with the grave situation in the Middle East, and in emphasizing the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war. For some reason, you can't do that anymore. Historically, hundreds of years ago, you could do it, but you can't do it anymore. And then it says that because of the charter principles, it requires you've got to have a just and lasting peace. So they say they have to withdraw their armed forces from the territories occupied in the recent conflict. That's Resolution 242. You got to leave all of this land that you got in 1967 and give it all back. So effectively, President Bush, he was advocating that Israel give up these 3 areas. The Golan Heights, which in this map is in the green upper right-hand corner, and that was captured from Syria. And the West Bank is in orange, and that's a sanitized name for the historical region. It's called Judea and Samaria in the Bible. They don't want to use that because they don't want you to realize, hey, Israel used to have this land. So they call it West Bank. Kind of distance it. And then the Gaza Strip in pink, which was captured from Egypt. And that doesn't leave much left for Israel, as it's already a small nation. And it's only 290 miles long, 85 miles wide, as you can see on this map. And if you take away the West Bank, Israel is only 9 miles wide. So there isn't much left at all if they give that up. It's an incredibly small nation, about the size of New Jersey. Yet the whole world is obsessed with dividing it into even smaller pieces. And there's no logical reason for this obsession, but it certainly proves the prophecies in the Bible are correct. So the God of the Bible is definitely the one true God. All you have to do is look at Israel. Take a look at the map of ancient Israel here, and you'll see that they possessed all 3 of these areas that President Bush wanted them to give up. The 12 tribes, they covered the whole land, as you can see, all over it. Let's look at the so-called West Bank, which is actually Judea and Samaria, names that frequently occur throughout the Bible. Judea occurs 46 times, and Samaria is mentioned 115 times. This region is biblical Israel. It's Israel. All of the ancient Israel's major events happened here, and this is the region that the United Nations wants them to return, to Jordan, all of it. 40% of the land was partitioned off for Palestinian settlements in the signing of the Oslo II Accord on September the 28th of 1995. And it was with Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat, and U.S. President Bill Clinton presided over the Oslo II Accords. And so now they got the land. They're trying to get the Palestinians to self-govern. So they're going to say, okay, this is your designated area. And so it created an interim Palestinian self-government authority with limited powers and in responsibilities in areas A and B on this map. Area A is dark gray, and it's full Palestinian civil and security control. It's about 18%. Area B is light gray, and it's got Palestinian civil control with joint Israeli-Palestinian civil control together. That's 22% of the land. And notice that the light gray areas intentionally, they provide an extra security buffer around the darker areas because Israel wants to make sure they can cover things. Area C in white has full Israeli control and Israeli security, and it's 60% of the land. So on this map here, we merged Palestinian areas A and B, so it's easier to see the regions with the Palestinian settlements. The Israeli settlements are represented by red dots, and the light green area is Area C, which is under full Israeli control. The original plan was to have Israel methodically turn over this whole region to the Palestinians as they showed signs of reforming and becoming civilized and responsible. And of course, however, this never happened. Therefore, the Israelis took advantage of the opportunity and started building settlements themselves. They said, well, you're not going to reform, we're going to do something. From 1967 to 2006, Israel had established and legalized 127 settlements, and they're all sandwiched in between the Palestinian areas. Prior to the September 2025 United Nations Annual Summit, France, Britain, Canada, and Australia, they announced their intentions to recognize a Palestinian state. And they carried it through on September the 21st of 2025. They actually did. And so this action was seen as a rebuke to Israel's continued assault on Gaza, as well as an effort to revive a two-state solution. So this motivated Israel to respond by approving the E1 settlement project, and they approved 3,400 new housing units on August 20th of 2025. So they said, okay, you're going to go for a Palestinian state, we're going to make sure there's not one. And so here's what Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, head of the religious Zionism party, said. He said, today we are establishing historical facts on the ground. The Palestinian state is being erased from the table, not with slogans, but with actions. Every community, every neighborhood, every housing unit is another nail in the coffin of this dangerous idea. So they're starting to rebel against this and take this land back. On February the 5th of 2026, Defense Minister Israel Katz, he announced that the government is preparing to normalize the legal status of 140 agricultural farms that already exist in this region. But until now, they just let them stay there without any formal recognition. He said, these farms are a fortified wall to safeguard our lands and strengthen our hold on our historic homeland. In other words, it's a guard against a Palestinian state. They're being legalized. And additionally, in 2026, there's at least 103 existing Israeli neighborhoods and outposts that have been formally legalized, shown in red on this article's map, and with the 127 existing settlements are in light blue. On March the 17th of 2026, trailers arrived at the Sumerian town of Sanur. It had been 20 years since any Jews lived there. This was the very last settlement to be evacuated in Ariel Sharon's 2005 disengagement plan that we just started out talking about to comply with President George W. Bush's roadmap debacle. The building in the background is the old British fortress upon which the defiant settlers took their last stand. Now they're coming back. On April 19th of 2026, Israeli ministers Bezalel Smotrich and Israel Katz, they attended official reopening of the Sanur settlement nearly 21 years after it's evacuated. And here's what he said, on this exciting day, we celebrate a historic correction to the criminal expulsion. And he said, additionally, Israel authorities were burying the idea of a Palestinian state. So you finally have some people in government that are backing the settlers in this area. On August the 13th of 2026, 30 Israeli families reestablished the nearby settlement of Genem, also in Samaria. After 21 years, they too were coming back. Notice the AR-15 rifle on this guy's shoulder. The result is that in 2026, there are now more than 470 settlements across the West Bank. Now, let's add Jerusalem to the picture, shown in red. This is the current situation today. Note the small yellow square in the center of the red area. That's the Temple Mount. If the United Nations Resolution 242 were fully implemented, all of the settlements, these red dots, would have to be eliminated. So let's take them off the map. This would displace 541,000 Jews in Judea and Samaria. Now let's remove East Jerusalem, and to take us back to the 1949 and to 1967 borders that the United Nations is demanding, and this would displace another 340,000 Jews. So we would have a total of 880,000 Jews displaced of the total 7 million Jews in Israel. And now the yellow square of the Temple Mount is outside of Jewish control like it was in right before 1967. So that's where they want to take Israel. But let's look at Zechariah's prophecy about the future of Jerusalem and what he knew about these 1967 pre-67 borders. For I will gather all the nations, that means the United Nations, the UN, to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses plundered, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Notice that's what you see in the pre-67 map. The western Jerusalem is not cut off, just like he said. Then Yehovah will go forth and fight against those nations. The UN, the United Nations, they're going to fight against them. So it's exactly as the prophecy said 2,500 years ago. He saw Israel's pre-1967 borders, and he said that's going to be what brings the Yeshua back to fight for Israel. And we're that close. So it's extremely unusual for only half a city to go into captivity. You know, as this prophecy said, especially in ancient times, because there'd be a wall around the whole city. But what they're not trying to take the whole city, they're trying to go back to the borders. And there's proof right there. They only take half the city. So that perfectly explains this prophecy. You know, 2,500 years ago, we saw it. This event is the catalyst that makes the Messiah return to fight for Israel. And so Joel also prophesied the same thing. He said, I will gather all the nations, which is the United Nations, and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And I will enter into judgment with them there, on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. They have also divided up my land. They have divided his land. And that's what we're asking, our presidents have been asking Israel to do. So we're not on the right side of this issue. So let's look at exactly what God says about this land of Israel. Yehovah made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. And so the shaded area on this map is between the Nile and Euphrates. And technically it includes all of Jordan, all of Syria, all of Lebanon, as well as half of Iraq, half of Egypt, and half of Saudi Arabia. If you read that, literally that's what it means. He says, I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession. So this land is perpetual. It does not expire. It doesn't matter that Israel was forcibly removed out of their land for 2,000 years and then reinstalled back in our modern times. Everlasting means forever. And I've set the border from the Red Sea even into the Sea of the Philistines. That's Gaza. The Philistines lived in Gaza. And the Mediterranean Sea. And from the wilderness into the river, that's the Euphrates River. For I give into your hand the inhabitants of the land. That's the promise. So God explicitly, he says Gaza is part of the land of Israel. And so that's the area that Presidents Bush and now Trump are telling Israel that you just simply can't have that. So we're conflicting with somebody that's not going to be too happy if we make them leave again. The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. So God is saying that he retains the ownership. And it belongs to him. He's only leasing it to Israel. And they can sublet it, but it's his. He can't sell it. And so it says, you shall make no covenant with them. That means no land for peace treaty. They shall not dwell in your land. That means no two-state solution. And he says, a land for which Yehovah, your God, cares, the eyes of Yehovah, your God, always on it, from the beginning of the year to the very end of the year. So this 49-second panorama from satellite images just might give us a better perspective of what God sees.